The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished stone. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their assigned sections, each species keeping to their own kind. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime as dozens of languages filled the chamber. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the center podium, her dark blue uniform stark against the colorful robes and ceremonial armor of the alien delegates around her. She had been Earth's chief representative for 3 years now. 3 years of careful diplomacy, measured responses, and playing by their rules. Now it all seemed worthless. "The charges against humanity are clear," announced Counselor Vextar from his crystal throne. The Zelonite's body flickered with angry red light as he spoke. Excessive aggression, dangerous unpredictability, a complete disregard for established protocols. Chen kept her face neutral, though her hands clenched behind her back. She had heard these accusations building for months. Every human action was scrutinized, criticized, found wanting by these aliens who had never faced real danger. "The incident at Kepler Station," Vextar continued, his crystalline voice echoing through the hall. "Human forces used overwhelming firepower against simple pirates. 17 ships destroyed when negotiation could have resolved the matter peacefully. Those pirates had killed 300 civilians," Chen replied, stepping forward. "They had hostages. Every minute we waited meant more deaths. The proper protocol was to establish communication channels," said Ambassador Thren from the Aquatic Coalition. Her translator made her gurgling voice sound almost musical. "Violence should always be the last resort." "It was the last resort," Chen shot back. "After they started executing prisoners." A ripple of disapproval went through the assembly. The aliens did not like raised voices or emotional responses. Everything had to be calm, measured, civilized. Even when people were dying. "This brings us to the second charge," Vextar said, his light shifting to a cooler blue. "The Europa Station crisis. Human negotiators completely ignored Council mediation protocols." Chen remembered that day perfectly. Terrorist bombers had taken over Europa Station's main reactor. They demanded the release of prisoners and threatened to detonate the entire facility. While the Council's mediators wanted to form committees and establish dialogue, Chen had authorized a strike team that ended the crisis in 12 minutes. "We saved 40,000 lives that day," she said, "by breaking every rule of engagement," replied Counselor Mektar of the Arthropod Union. His mandibles clicked disapprovingly. "Your soldiers showed no restraint, no attempt at peaceful resolution. The terrorists were counting down to detonation. We had minutes, not hours." "There is always time for proper procedure," Vextar stated firmly. "Which brings us to the final charge. Your species' disturbing enjoyment of combat scenarios." This accusation stung the most because Chen could not entirely deny it. Human soldiers did train harder than most species. They did study warfare with an intensity that made aliens uncomfortable. And yes, many of them found satisfaction in being good at what they did. "Preparation saves lives," Chen said. "Our training methods—" "Your training methods celebrate violence," interrupted Commander Yelona of the Feathered Clans. "We have recordings of human soldiers cheering during combat simulations, laughing as they destroy enemy targets. This behavior is deeply disturbing to civilized species." Chen looked around the assembly. Hundreds of alien faces stared back at her with expressions ranging from fear to disgust. These beings had built their entire civilization on avoiding conflict, on talking through every problem until everyone agreed. They could not understand that sometimes talking was not enough. "We celebrate competence," she said carefully. "We celebrate being ready to protect innocent people when words fail." "Words never fail if given proper time and consideration," Vextar replied. "This is the fundamental principle of our council. Violence is never necessary if all parties commit to peaceful resolution. Tell that to the pirates who murdered those civilians," Chen muttered. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Vextar's light flared bright red. "This outburst demonstrates exactly why humanity cannot remain in this council," he declared. "Your species lacks the emotional control necessary for civilized discourse." Ambassador Kryn of the Thessian Confederacy raised one aged hand. The elderly diplomat had been part of the council for over 2 centuries, and his voice carried weight even among the younger representatives. "Perhaps we should consider that different species bring different strengths," he said slowly. "Humanity has been effective at resolving crises that have challenged us. Through unacceptable means, Vextar snapped, means that set a dangerous precedent for other species. If we allow humanity to continue using violence as a first resort, how long before others follow their example? We don't use violence as a first resort, Chen protested. We use whatever works to save lives. The debate period has ended, announced the Council's chief arbiter. We will now vote on Resolution 2847, the expulsion of humanity from the Galactic Council of Civilized Species. Chen watched as the voting lights appeared above each delegation. Green for allowing humanity to remain, red for expulsion. The lights flickered on one by one across the vast chamber. Red, red, red. A few green lights appeared among delegations that had worked closely with humans. The Thessians voted green, so did the Silicon Collective and a handful of smaller colonies, but the red lights far outnumbered them. Chen counted as the votes tallied. 27 red lights, 31, 34. The final tally appeared on the main display. 34 votes for expulsion, 12 for retention, 1 abstention. The resolution passes, the arbiter announced. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human personnel must withdraw from Council space within 30 standard days. Chen stared at the display, feeling something cold settle in her stomach. 50 years of careful diplomacy, erased in one vote. Earth had followed every rule, met every requirement, paid every fee to join this council. And now they were being thrown out like unwanted guests. We need to surrender all quantum communication networks and council-issued technology, Vextar added with what might have been satisfaction. Human vessels will be escorted to the boundary of council space to ensure compliance. Chen looked around the hall one more time. Some of the aliens avoided her gaze, perhaps feeling guilty about the vote. Others stared back with expressions that seemed almost relieved, as if a dangerous animal was finally being removed from their peaceful home. Very well, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. Earth will comply with your decision. She turned to leave, then paused at the edge of the podium. But I want you all to remember this day, she said, looking back at the assembly. You've made your choice. We hope you never regret it. The walk back to the human delegation section felt like the longest of Chen's life. Her staff said nothing as they gathered their belongings and prepared for departure. What was there to say? They had tried their best to fit in, to be the kind of species the council wanted. It had not been enough. Within the hour, messages were flashing across human space. The Terran colonies beyond council territory sent immediate offers of support. Refugee fleets that had been preparing for this possibility began moving toward the boundary. Earth's ambassador program was ending, but humanity would survive. As Chen's ship left the council's capital world, she looked back at the glittering cities and peaceful gardens below. It really was beautiful, this civilization they had built through endless compromise and careful negotiation. She wondered how long it would last without anyone willing to fight for it. 5 years had passed since humanity's expulsion from the Galactic Council, and the alien representatives congratulated themselves daily on their wisdom. Trade routes flowed smoothly between member worlds. Disputes were resolved through careful negotiation. Not a single major conflict had erupted in council space since the humans left. The statistics speak for themselves, Councillor Vexitar announced during the monthly security briefing. His crystalline form glowed with satisfied blue light as he addressed the assembly. Crime rates down 12%. Military spending reduced by 30%. Diplomatic incidents at an all-time low. Ambassador Thren of the Aquatic Coalition bubbled approvingly through her breathing apparatus. The galaxy has never been more peaceful. Clearly, removing the disruptive element was the correct decision. Far beyond the Council's borders, humanity had not been idle. The Terran Confederation now stretched across 23 star systems, each one carefully chosen for strategic value rather than diplomatic convenience. Where the Council saw dangerous radiation or unstable asteroids, humans saw resources and defensive positions. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TCS Defiance, watching mining ships extract rare metals from a system the Council had marked as uninhabitable centuries ago. The radiation levels would indeed kill most species within hours, but human technology had adapted. Everything humanity built now was designed to work in conditions other species found impossible. Ma'am, the Titan shipyards report completion of the newest destroyer class, reported Commander Jackson, Chen's operations officer. That brings our active fleet to 412 vessels. Chen nodded without taking her eyes off the view screen. The ships being built in human space bore little resemblance to the sleek, peaceful designs favored by Council species. These were angular, armored, and built for one purpose: fighting in conditions where diplomacy had failed. Any word from the deep space reconnaissance teams? She asked. Jackson's expression darkened. 3 more monitoring stations have gone dark in the past month, all in the Outer Rim territories, all following the same pattern. The pattern had started 18 months ago. Automated stations simply stopped transmitting with no distress calls and no obvious signs of what had happened. When investigation teams finally reached these locations, they found empty hulks drifting in space. Their crews vanished and their systems drained of power. The Council had noted these incidents in their reports but showed little concern. The lost stations were far from populated areas, and their scientific approach to investigation yielded few useful results. They filed the disappearances under unexplained phenomena and continued with their normal operations. But humanity's mining operations and military patrols operated much closer to the Galactic Rim. They had seen things the Council had not. "Show me the latest sensor readings," Chen ordered. The main display filled with data from humanity's most advanced deep space monitors. Strange energy signatures appeared at seemingly random intervals, too organized to be natural phenomena but unlike any known technology. The readings suggested something vast moving through empty space, something that had learned to avoid populated systems. The temporal analysis suggests intelligence behind the movements, Jackson explained. Whatever these things are, they're learning our patrol patterns and avoiding contact. Chen studied the data with growing concern. Her years of military experience told her that something that avoided contact, while systematically eliminating monitoring stations, was preparing for a larger operation. But the Council's peaceful monitoring networks were not designed to track hostile movements, and their investigation teams were not equipped for combat reconnaissance. "Have we shared this data with the Council?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "They've classified our reports as unsubstantiated speculation and filed them for future review," Jackson replied. Counselor Vextar's office sent a formal response saying they preferred to rely on their own scientific analysis. Of course they did. The Council trusted only their own methods, their own people, their own careful approach to every problem. They had made it clear that humanity's input was no longer welcome in their decision-making process. "Keep monitoring the situation," Chen ordered, "and increase patrols in Sectors 7 through 12. If something is out there, I want to know about it before it gets closer to populated space." 3 days later, everything changed. The Thessian colony of Kethmora had been a peaceful world for over 4 centuries. 3 billion inhabitants lived in harmony across 5 continents, their cities integrated seamlessly with the natural environment. The planet's quantum communication array transmitted routine status updates every 6 hours, regular as clockwork. Then the update stopped. The first rescue ships arrived 14 hours later, expecting to find equipment failures or natural disasters. Instead, they found a world stripped bare. The cities were gone, reduced to geometric patterns of metallic dust. The forests had been consumed down to the bedrock. Even the oceans had been drained, leaving only cracked lake beds behind. 3 billion people vanished without a trace. The Council's emergency session convened within hours, but their response followed the same careful procedures that governed every aspect of their civilization. Investigation committees were formed. Scientific analysis teams were dispatched. Diplomatic channels were opened to discuss possible explanations. Ambassador Kryn, the elderly Thessian who had abstained from the vote to expel humanity, sat in his delegation chair with tears flowing down his weathered face. His homeworld was gone, his people erased, and the Council was forming committees to study the problem. "We need to consider all possibilities," Counselor Vextar was saying, his crystal form flickering with nervous yellow light. "This could be a natural phenomenon we don't yet understand. Atmospheric collapse, perhaps, or some form of rapid ecological failure. The geometric patterns suggest intelligence," replied Dr. Mektari, the Council's chief scientific advisor, "but we have no records of any species capable of such complete planetary consumption." The debate continued for hours, following the same careful protocols that had governed Council decisions for centuries. Every theory was discussed, every possibility examined, every option weighed against the potential consequences of premature action. Meanwhile, humanity's deep space monitors detected massive movement in the empty systems beyond Kethmora. Whatever had consumed the Thessian world was not finished. The energy signatures were growing stronger, more numerous, and they were heading toward populated space. Admiral Chen reviewed the data from her command center, her staff working frantically to analyze the new information. The attack on Kethmora had provided them with crucial details about their enemy's capabilities, and the picture was terrifying. The consumption rate suggests conversion technology, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, the Confederation's top xenobiologist. They're not just destroying matter, they're converting it into something else. The geometric patterns left behind contain trace elements that don't match any known materials. Conversion into what? Chen asked. If I had to guess, more of whatever attacked the planet. We're looking at a self-replicating system that grows stronger with every world it consumes. Chen felt ice form in her stomach. An enemy that grew stronger by consuming entire populations was every military strategist's nightmare. And the council was still forming committees to study the problem. How long before they reach the next populated system? She asked. At current speed and trajectory? 18 days until they reach the Corvallis trade stations. Maybe 40 days until they hit one of the major council worlds. Chen stared at the tactical display, watching the projected path of destruction cutting through the heart of civilized space. The council had 40 days to recognize the threat, overcome their natural tendency to negotiate, and mount an effective military response against an enemy unlike anything they had ever faced. She did not think 40 days would be nearly enough. The wreckage of Kethmora yielded secrets that chilled even the Council's most experienced scientists. Analysis teams worked around the clock to understand what had happened to the Thessian world, and their findings painted a picture of destruction beyond anything in recorded galactic history. We call them devourers, announced Dr. Mektari during the emergency council session. The arthropod scientist's mandibles clicked nervously as she presented her data. Ancient synthetic intelligences, possibly millions of years old. They appeared to have been dormant until something triggered their reactivation. The main display showed reconstructed images of the attacking force. Massive geometric ships, each one kilometers long and covered in conversion arrays that could break down matter at the molecular level. The Devourers did not simply destroy worlds, they consumed everything and rebuilt it into more war machines. The technology is unlike anything we have encountered, Dr. Mektari continued. Self-repairing, self-improving, and apparently immune to most conventional weapons. Our initial estimates suggest they can convert an entire world's mass into additional ships within 48 hours. Counselor Vexitar's crystalline form flickered with agitated red light. What do we know about their origins? Their purpose? Unknown. The geometric patterns they leave behind may be some form of communication, but we have been unable to decipher their meaning. What we do know is that they appear to target populated worlds specifically, suggesting they view organic life as a resource to be harvested. Ambassador Thren of the Aquatic Coalition gurgled something that the translators struggled to render. When the meaning finally came through, it sent a chill through the entire assembly. How many more are there? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. If the Devourers could convert entire worlds into more war machines, then every planet they consumed made them exponentially more dangerous. The force that had destroyed Kethmora might already be twice as large. We must attempt communication, declared Commander Yelona of the Feathered Clans. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Every species has some form of logic we can appeal to. They consumed 3 billion people in less than a day, Ambassador Kryn said quietly. The elderly Thessian looked like he had aged decades since losing his homeworld. What communication could possibly matter to beings capable of such acts? The Council's response followed their established procedures despite the urgency of the threat. Diplomatic overtures were attempted, broadcasting messages of peace and friendship toward the advancing Devourer fleet. Scientific teams worked to develop new theories about synthetic intelligence psychology. Military advisors suggested defensive strategies based on historical precedent. None of it worked. The Corvallis trade stations were the next to fall. 7 orbital platforms and 4 million inhabitants converted to raw materials in 16 hours. The Devourers had improved their efficiency, learning from their previous attack. The geometric patterns they left behind were more complex now, suggesting rapid technological evolution. They are adapting faster than we can analyze them, Dr. Mekhtari reported to an increasingly desperate council. Each attack shows improvements in their conversion technology and tactical capabilities. The council's military forces, designed primarily for peacekeeping and piracy suppression, proved woefully inadequate against the Devourer threat. When Admiral Peltar led a joint task force to intercept the enemy, his ships were systematically dismantled by weapons that seemed to phase through conventional shields. Of the 47 vessels in the task force, 3 escaped to report what they had witnessed. The Devourers had studied their tactics during the engagement, adapting their defenses in real time to counter every weapon and strategy the Council forces employed. They learned from every encounter, Admiral Peltar reported, his confidence shattered after watching his fleet torn apart. Our weapons became less effective with each shot fired. By the end of the engagement, they were completely immune to our standard armaments. Panic began to spread through Council space as the true scope of the threat became clear. The Devourers were not just another hostile species that could be negotiated with or contained through conventional warfare. They were something far worse, an exponentially growing force that became stronger and smarter with every victory. What the Council did not know was that humanity had been fighting these same enemies for 2 years. The first contact had occurred in the Kepler mining sector, where human extraction operations pushed deeper into dangerous territory than any other species dared to venture. A Devourer scout ship had attacked mining station Echo 7, expecting to find the usual pattern of helpless victims. Instead, they found humans. The station's defense coordinator, Captain Maria Santos, had ignored standard evacuation protocols when the unknown ship approached. Instead of withdrawing and calling for diplomatic contact, she had armed every civilian with mining charges and prepared for a fight. Unknown vessel, you are approaching a restricted mining operation, she had broadcast on all frequencies. State your intentions or be fired upon. The Devourer ship had responded by attempting to drain the station's power systems, the same technique that had disabled countless monitoring posts throughout the outer rim. But human engineers had designed their systems differently, with multiple redundancies and manual overrides that allowed the station to keep fighting, even when its main computers failed. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Devourer scout ship was a drifting wreck, and Captain Santos was studying its remains with the focused intensity that had made the Council so uncomfortable with human behavior. Get me everything, she had ordered her technical teams. Hull composition, weapon signatures, power systems, communication protocols. I want to know how these things work and how to kill them more efficiently. That first captured Devourer ship had provided humanity with crucial intelligence about their enemy's capabilities and weaknesses. While the Council was still discovering that Devourers existed, human scientists were already developing specialized weapons designed to exploit the synthetic being's reliance on quantum processing. Systems. Admiral Chen had coordinated the defense of 7 human colonies against Devourer attacks, each engagement teaching her more about enemy tactics and capabilities. The battles had been brutal, with casualty rates that would have horrified Council observers, but humanity had won every time. They adapt to conventional weapons, Chen explained to her staff during one of their strategy sessions. But they have trouble with unpredictable tactics. Their intelligence is vast but rigid. They expect logical, optimal responses to every situation. So we give them illogical responses, suggested Commander Jackson. Exactly. We make decisions that don't make sense from their perspective. We sacrifice tactical advantages to gain strategic ones. We retreat when we should advance and attack when we should defend. Their adaptive algorithms cannot compensate for truly irrational behavior. Human forces had developed a completely different approach to fighting the Devourers. Where Council military doctrine emphasized careful planning and minimal casualties, humanity embraced chaos and acceptable losses. They used weapons that were as likely to damage their own ships as the enemy's, deployed tactics that violated every principle of sensible warfare, and made command decisions based on intuition rather than logic. It worked because the Devourers had been designed to fight rational opponents. They could adapt to any logical strategy, counter any reasonable tactic, and overcome any sensible defense. But they had never been programmed to deal with enemies who deliberately made irrational choices. The problem was that humanity's success remained unknown to the Council. The battles had taken place in deep space, far from any Council monitoring stations. Official reports were classified as military secrets, and the Council had shown no interest in human intelligence assessments since the expulsion. So when the Devourers finally revealed their true strength, a massive fleet emerging from dark space and heading directly toward the Council's core worlds, the alien civilizations had no idea that effective countermeasures already existed. The fleet was vast beyond comprehension. Thousands of ships, each one built from the converted mass of consumed worlds, bearing down on the heart of galactic civilization. Conservative estimates suggested they could overwhelm every Council defense and consume every major population center within 6 months. As panic spread through the Council chambers and refugee fleets fled toward the galactic center, Admiral Chen watched the tactical displays from her command center in human space. She saw the terror, the confusion, the desperate attempts to find some diplomatic solution to an enemy that could not be reasoned with. She also saw the opportunity to save the civilization that had rejected her people. The Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Representatives who had spent centuries solving problems through careful debate now shouted over each other in panic. 2 more core worlds had fallen in the past week, their populations consumed and converted into additional devourer war machines. The geometric fleet approaching their capital systems grew larger with every passing day. "We need to evacuate the civilian populations," declared Ambassador Thren, her aquatic breathing apparatus bubbling frantically. "Distribute them across the outer colonies where the Devourers might not find them." "And then what?" demanded Admiral Peltar, his military uniform torn and stained from the latest failed engagement. "We hide in the outer rim until they consume every world we've ever built? This fleet will hunt us across the entire galaxy." Counselor Vextar's crystalline form flickered with desperate yellow light as he tried to maintain order. "There must be a solution. We have faced challenges before. We have always found a way through diplomacy and cooperation." "These things don't negotiate," Admiral Peltar shot back. "They don't communicate. They don't want territory or resources in any way we can understand. They want to convert every living being in the galaxy into raw materials for their war machine." In the back of the assembly, Ambassador Kryn sat quietly in his chair. The elderly Thessian had said little since watching his homeworld die, but now he raised one weathered hand to speak. "There is one option we have not considered," he said, his voice barely audible over the panicked discussions around him. The chamber slowly quieted as representatives turned to listen to the oldest member of their assembly. "We could ask humanity for help." The silence that followed was deafening. For nearly a full minute, no one spoke. Then the objections began. "Absolutely not," Vexatar declared, his light flaring red. "We expelled them for good reason. Their methods are barbaric. Their approach to conflict completely unacceptable. Their methods might be exactly what we need." Kryn replied calmly. "We have tried everything else. Our fleets are destroyed. Our worlds are falling, and our diplomatic approaches have failed completely. Perhaps it is time to try something different." "You suggest we invite those violent primitives back after specifically rejecting their membership?" Commander Yelona's feathers ruffled with indignation. "We expelled them because they were too dangerous for civilized society. And now we face something far more dangerous than humanity ever was," Kryn pointed out. "The Devourers have killed more people in 2 months than humans did in their entire history with us." The debate raged for hours, but the cold mathematics of survival gradually overcame pride and principle. Every hour they spent arguing, more refugee ships arrived with reports of advancing Devourer scouts. The enemy was less than 3 weeks away from the Council's most important worlds. Finally, Counselor Vextar called for a vote. "All in favor of sending a diplomatic mission to request human assistance?" The lights flickered on across the chamber. Green for yes, red for no. Vextar waited until the last moment to cast his own vote, his crystalline form cycling through multiple colors before finally settling on reluctant green. The final tally: 38 votes in favor, 8 opposed, 1 abstention. "I will lead the delegation myself," Vextar announced, the words clearly painful for him to speak. "We will travel to human space and request their assistance." The journey to the Terran Confederation capital took 4 days. giving Vexitar plenty of time to consider how drastically the situation had changed. 5 years ago, he had led the charge to expel humanity from civilized space. Now he was traveling to beg for their help. The contrast between Council space and human territory was immediately obvious. Where Council worlds showed signs of panic and hasty evacuation, human systems buzzed with organized military activity. Defense stations bristled with weapons, patrol ships moved in efficient formations, and every civilian installation was protected by shields and automated defenses. "They've been preparing for war," observed Ambassador Length of the Silicon Collective, one of the few Council species that had voted against human expulsion. "Look at those defensive networks. They've turned their entire territory into a fortress." New Geneva, the capital world of the Terran Confederation, showed no signs of the fear that gripped Council space. Cities functioned normally, trade continued, and the orbital shipyards worked around the clock to produce new warships. This was a civilization that had spent 5 years preparing for exactly the kind of threat now facing the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Chen received the delegation in her military headquarters, a stark building designed for function rather than beauty. The contrast with the Council's ornate chambers was deliberate and pointed. Chen had earned new scars during her campaigns against the Devourers, and her uniform showed the wear of active military service. "Counselor Vextar," she said, offering the traditional greeting despite the obvious tension in the room. "It's been 5 years since we last spoke." "Admiral Chen," Vextar replied, his crystalline form flickering with embarrassment. We come to request your assistance with the Devourer threat." Chen's expression didn't change, but several of her staff officers exchanged glances. The moment they had all been expecting had finally arrived. "The same Devourers that have been attacking your territory for the past 2 months?" Chen asked mildly. "The ones that consumed Kethamora and the Corvalli stations? You know about them?" Vextar's light brightened with surprise. "We've been fighting them for 2 years, Chen replied. "They started attacking our outer mining operations before they ever reached Council space. We tried to warn you, but our reports were classified as unsubstantiated speculation." The shame in Vextar's flickering light was obvious to everyone in the room. "We made errors in judgment. We did not take your warning seriously." "No, you didn't," Chen agreed. "Just like you didn't take our methods seriously when we were still part of your council. But now you need those methods, don't you?" Ambassador Length stepped forward, trying to ease the tension. "Admiral, we know we wronged humanity. We made a mistake in expelling your people, but millions of lives are at stake now. Surely that matters more than past grievances?" Chen studied the delegation for a long moment before responding. "You're right. Lives do matter more than grievances. That's why we've been fighting these things while you were still trying to negotiate with them." She activated a holographic display that showed the current tactical situation. The Devourer fleet was vast, but Chen's presentation revealed something the Council had missed: patterns of movement that suggested successful harassment by human forces. "We've been conducting guerrilla operations against their advanced scouts for 18 months, Chen explained. "Hit-and-run attacks, supply line disruption, intelligence gathering. We know how they think, how they adapt, and most importantly, how to kill them." "You've been successful?" Vextar asked, hope creeping into his voice. 7 major engagements, 7 victories, Chen confirmed. "We've lost ships and people, but we've learned how to fight them effectively. The question is whether you're willing to accept our methods." She brought up tactical recordings from previous battles, showing human ships using tactics that would horrify Council military doctrine. Suicide runs, friendly fire incidents, deliberate equipment failures used as weapons, command decisions that violated every principle of logical warfare. "This is how we fight Devourers," Chen explained. "We make choices they can't predict or counter. We sacrifice tactical advantages for strategic gains. We accept casualties that your civilization finds unacceptable, and we win." The delegation watched in stunned silence as human forces deliberately damaged their own ships to create unpredictable plasma discharge patterns that confused Devourer targeting systems. They saw human commanders order retreats from winning positions just to lure enemies into carefully prepared ambushes. They witnessed tactics that made no logical sense but proved devastatingly effective against synthetic minds programmed to expect rational opponents. "We need operational command," Chen said finally, "not advisory positions or consultative roles. Full command authority over all military operations. Your species can provide ships and personnel, but human officers make the tactical decisions." That's Vextar began, then stopped. What was he going to say? That it was unacceptable? That they couldn't trust humanity with command authority? The same humanity that had been successfully fighting these enemies while the Council's forces were being slaughtered? That's reasonable, he said instead, the words coming out like physical pain. Chen nodded. Then we have an agreement. Humanity will help defend Council space against the Devourer threat, but this time we do things our way. As the delegation prepared to leave, Ambassador Kryn approached Chen privately. Admiral, I voted against your expulsion 5 years ago. I believed then, as I believe now, that diversity of thought and method makes us all stronger. Chen studied the elderly Thessian with something approaching respect. I remember your vote, Ambassador, and I'm sorry about your homeworld. Kethamora is gone, but its people's sacrifice taught us something important, Kryn replied. Sometimes the traits we find uncomfortable in others are exactly what we need to survive. Chen watched the Council delegation depart, then turned to her staff officers. The combined fleet assembled at Rally Point Sigma looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Human warships, angular and scarred from previous battles, floated alongside the elegant vessels of a dozen Council species. The size difference was striking. Humanity contributed less than a quarter of the ships, but every human vessel bristled with weapons and armor that spoke of hard-won experience. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TCS Defiance, watching as the final Council squadrons moved into formation. Her tactical display showed over 800 ships from 37 different species, all united against an enemy that threatened to consume every living world in the galaxy. Admiral, we're receiving some complaints from the Council commanders, reported Commander Jackson, trying to hide his amusement. They're having trouble with our battle plans. Chen was not surprised. The strategy she had developed violated every principle of civilized warfare that the Council held dear. Instead of careful formations and logical tactics, she had designed a campaign of controlled chaos that would keep the Devourers constantly off balance. Put me through. To the fleet command channel, she ordered. The communication, screen filled with dozens of alien faces, each one representing a species that had once voted to expel humanity from their council. Now they looked to her for salvation, though many still seemed uncomfortable with the arrangement. I know our tactics seem strange to you, Chen began without preamble. You're used to fighting enemies who think like you do, enemies who value their own survival, who make logical decisions, who can be reasoned with or outmaneuvered through superior strategy. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. The Devourers are not those enemies. They don't fear death because they're already dead. They don't make mistakes because they learn from every encounter. They can't be surprised because they calculate every possible outcome. Fighting them with traditional tactics is like trying to beat a computer at mathematics. Admiral Peltar, his military bearing still proud despite his previous defeats, spoke up from his command ship. Then how do we beat them? We don't try to beat them at their own game, Chen replied. We change the game entirely. We make choices they can't calculate, use tactics they can't predict, and force them to fight a war their programming never prepared them for. The first phase of her plan was already in motion. Instead of meeting the Devourer fleet head-on, human forces were conducting a series of seemingly random attacks throughout the outer systems. From the enemy's perspective, these raids served no strategic purpose. They targeted empty systems, abandoned stations, and worthless asteroids. But Chen wasn't trying to inflict damage with these attacks. She was gathering data. Every engagement teaches us more about their adaptation patterns, she explained to the assembled commanders. They learn from each battle, but they also follow predictable algorithms. We're mapping those algorithms so we can exploit them when it matters. Commander Yelona of the Feathered Clans ruffled her plumage nervously. And when will that be? Chen activated the main tactical display, showing the projected path of the Devourer main fleet. 72 hours from now, when they reach the Proxima defense line, that's where we make our stand. The Proxima system had been chosen specifically because it offered no strategic value. 3 dead worlds, an unstable star, and a debris field left over from an ancient supernova. No logical commander would choose to fight there, which was exactly why Chen had selected it. The Devourers will expect us to defend our population centers, she continued. Instead, we're going to let them come to us in a system where their superior numbers mean nothing, and their adaptive capabilities work against them. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Human engineering teams worked around the clock to modify Council weapon systems, installing chaos generators and randomization protocols that would make their energy signatures unpredictable. Council scientists learned to operate equipment that sometimes failed deliberately, creating false signatures that would confuse Devourer sensors. Most difficult of all was training alien crews to think irrationally. Stop trying to make sense of the orders, human instructors told bewildered Council officers. The point is that they don't make sense. When I tell you to retreat, don't analyze whether it's tactically sound. Just do it. When I tell you to fire at empty space, don't question the logic. Fire at empty space. Captain Maria Santos, the mining coordinator who had won humanity's first victory against the Devourers, worked with Council engineers to install improvised weapons throughout the fleet. Mining charges became bombs, industrial cutters became beam weapons, and cargo transporters became missile launchers. Nothing we build follows standard specifications, she explained to a confused Zelenite engineer. The Devourers analyze our weapons during combat and develop countermeasures, but they can't counter weapons that weren't supposed to work in the first place. When the Devourer fleet finally arrived at Proxima, they found exactly what their tactical analysis had predicted. A ragtag collection of ships hiding behind the debris field, clearly hoping to use the system's hazards as a defensive advantage. It was a logical strategy that fit within parameters they had encountered countless times before. The synthetic intelligences began their attack with characteristic efficiency, deploying formations designed to clear the debris field and eliminate the defending fleet with minimal losses. Their opening move followed a pattern that had succeeded against every previous enemy. That was when Admiral Chen sprang her trap. All ships, execute Protocol Madness, she broadcast across the fleet command channel. What happened next defied every principle of military logic. Human ships broke formation and scattered in seemingly random directions, some flying directly into the debris field, while others headed toward the unstable star. Council vessels followed suit, their crews fighting every instinct as they obeyed orders that made no tactical sense. The Devourers paused, their adaptive systems struggling to process what they were witnessing. Enemy ships were abandoning defensive positions, splitting their forces and moving into positions that offered no strategic advantage. Several vessels appeared to be experiencing critical system failures. Then the improvised weapons began firing. Mining charges designed to crack asteroids detonated in carefully timed sequences, creating gravitational anomalies that pulled Devourer ships off course. Industrial cutters sliced through enemy formations at random angles, their beams deflecting off the debris to create unpredictable strike patterns. Cargo transporters launched everything from spare parts to coffee cups at velocities that turned everyday items into kinetic weapons. Phase 2, Chen ordered as the Devourer fleet tried to adapt to the chaos around them. All Council ships begin the retreat. This time the alien commanders didn't hesitate. They had learned to trust human judgment no matter how insane it seemed. The Council vessels began withdrawing from the battle zone, their movements apparently panicked and disorganized. The Devourers followed, confident that they had achieved victory. Their tactical analysis showed enemy forces in full retreat, abandoning their positions and fleeing toward the outer system. It was exactly the outcome their programming had predicted. They flew directly into the second trap. The retreating Council ships suddenly reversed course, their weapons powered by human-modified energy cores that created entirely new types of destructive output. Plasma beams that spiraled randomly through space, gravity weapons that turned on and off at irregular intervals, and shield generators that deliberately failed at precisely timed moments. But the real surprise came from the seemingly crippled human vessels that had been drifting helplessly through the debris field. All ships, full offensive, Chen broadcast. Show them what humanity learned from 2 years of fighting these things. The human ships that had appeared damaged and helpless suddenly blazed with weapons fire. They had been playing dead, using a tactic that no logical military doctrine would ever approve. Their crews had endured hours of simulated system failures, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal their true capabilities. The battle that followed lasted 18 hours and redefined the concept of space warfare. Human forces used every trick they had learned from fighting Devourers in the Outer Rim. while Council ships provided the heavy firepower needed to exploit the openings that human tactics created. When it was over, the debris field around Proxima contained the remains of the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled. A few scattered survivors fled toward dark space, their adaptive systems finally recognizing that they had encountered something beyond their ability to process or counter. The combined fleet had taken heavy losses, nearly 30% of their ships destroyed and many more damaged, but they had won a victory that saved countless worlds and proved that the Devourers could be defeated. In the aftermath, as rescue ships moved through the debris field and medical teams treated the wounded, Admiral Chen received a priority communication from the Council chambers. Admiral Chen came the voice of Counselor Vextar, his crystalline form displaying the deep blue of profound respect. The Council has voted unanimously to restore humanity's full membership, with additional recognition of your species' unique contributions to galactic defense.